do a thorough pre-flight. Because ultimately, as the PIC and the owner-operator, it's on us to determine airworthiness, even though the airplane has been returned to service. Does that make sense? Now, I don't want to go too long, because this is what I want to talk the most about. I had to lay the foundation. Okay? We were accused of price gouging over oil changes. And it was really the second oil change that someone would come to us. And other service providers, because it was about 50-50. And I don't think anyone was really doing anything nefarious. What I think is that these aircraft, right, this isn't, right, your Cub with a 12-volt battery system that you hand prop that has one radio in it. These are advanced, complex aircraft. The challenge is getting into all of those darn ICAs. All right, the instructions for continued airworthiness. Technically, a mechanic would need to read the ICA for the line cutter, the ICA for the inflator, the ICA for the Garmin this, the ICA for the battery. Not to mention, we had a lot of Cirrus owners who grew up with other aircraft, oil change every 50 hours, one annual a year. Right? You put a Cirrus parked in a hangar right up against the intercoastal waterway, and you fly 300 hours in the year, I promise you, you have corrosion problems underneath the fairings. Because if you think about that mentality, all right, this is my experience. Those rules were kind of making the assumption that we were flying about 100 hours a year. Not the I fly my airplane like I drive my car, right? I go visit my mom in Orlando and I do the turnpike avoidance maneuver weekly. Right? I do not drive my truck to Orlando. I fly a Cirrus. Aircraft that are being used a ton, the military, the airlines, Wheels Up, NetJets, those aircraft are getting inspected on a very, very regular basis. So, about a year and a half ago, Cirrus published this document. Authorized Service Center Minimum Program, or Minimum Maintenance Program Information. In the top right-hand corner, there's smaller print, and I'm going to read it for everyone. For Cirrus ASC use only, do not distribute. Because when we first saw this, I thought about downloading this PDF and emailing it to Jay and go, hey, Jay, dude, this is a guide for you. Then I'm like, ooh, I can't do that. And then there's a line in the middle, right here, where it says, this maintenance schedule intervals are based on normal flying conditions and have been designed to meet several objectives, including maintaining warranty coverage. So anybody who wants to see this, you can come read it here. I just can't email it to you. And essentially what this document does is it takes the AMM with all the ICAs, and it's a guide for the service centers to better maintain your aircraft. And essentially, it creates 50-hour in-service and 100-hour in-service inspection intervals. And it details what needs to be done at each of those places to comply with everything in the AMM and the applicable ICAs. For a turbo, I can tell you it takes about 2.75 hours of labor to do an oil change in a turbo. About an hour and 3/4 for a normally aspirated. And you go, why? It's because of the cowling. The cowling is a lot harder to get off in the turbo because of where the intakes attach, okay, for the air intakes going into the turbines. It's just, it's tougher to get into. Plus, there's a few other things that you have to do when you're changing the oil. So, right, the minimum service, or the maintenance minimum program, it also gives us guides on how much labor it should take to do each of these inspections. And if you haven't heard this term, it's called the Cirrus Labor Allowance Guide, the CLAG. And like when you get your car worked on, every procedure for your vehicle, there's like a prescribed labor time that you get charged, right? And it's pretty much standardized from one Ford dealer to the next. Cirrus is doing the same thing. They give us the CLAG, and we don't have to go by the hours in the CLAG, but they're a great guide, is what we found. So the idea with the 50-hour in-service and the 100-hour in-service inspections is essentially, it's a 50-hour in-service, then a 100, a 50, and then a 100. And at some point, you're going to trigger the date for the annual. Now, when you look at the labor requirements, it's about 3.5 hours of labor for the 50-hour in-service on the turbo, 3 hours on the normally aspirated, 16 and 19 and a half, all right, for the NA and the turbo for the 100-hour in-service. That's the number of hours of labor. So it's, when you look at the cost, and if you do the 50 and the 100-hour in-service properly, yes, it's more expensive than an oil change. But you're actually getting a better airplane out of it, because things that we have found tend to fail are being inspected more often, and we're catching them before they actually fail and strand you somewhere. And more importantly, very important critical components, especially in the flight controls, are getting lubricated on a more regular basis. So our bookkeeper tells me that we typically see the 50-hour in-service being about $1,000 and the 100-hour in-service about $2,500. So if I'm managing my budget, what I recommend is, let's say I was looking at doing 250 hours this year. And we're going to assume that it was an easy math. So on January 1st, I started flying. So 50 hours later, I do a 50-hour in-service. Month and a half, the airplane comes back because we're at the 100-hour in-service. And then 50. And then as I'm getting close to triggering that second in-service, that second 100-hour in-service, I recommend that you forecast your flying for the rest of the year. And what I'm really talking about, forecast your flying until your next annual is due. Why? Because you can always reset the 50-hour and the 100-hour in-service intervals with an annual. So the annual resets the 50 and the 100-hour in-service. Now don't forget, there are benchmarks at 300 hours, 500 hours, 1,000 hours, and 24 months. And I'm not even going to bring in the 10 years for the shoot. Okay, so when you're looking at properly maintaining your SR2022, it's more than, all right, an oil change every 50 hours. Yes, Les.
Chris, so if my airplane 50 hours, let's say, need a break, before I would say oil change. Right now, you recommend don't say oil change. Just take it there to tell Cirrus I want in-service inspection.
I would use the phrase, can you please give me a 50-hour in-service?
In-service inspection, rather
Yep.
than just tell them oil change.
Yep. And, I mean, a lot of us, unfortunately, a lot of times, we learn the hard way. I can tell you that this team, they go above and beyond trying to do the best that they possibly can. And, ultimately, the best phraseology is a 50-hour in-service, a 100-hour in-service, an annual, or if you own an airplane that's for hire, an FAA 100-hour inspection. Funny story, 22 Bravo Victor, our first SR-20, which allowed us to open up our CTC. It had some paint defects. It was actually delivered in November of 2020. And late February, early March of 21, it had some paint defects, so we figured it was best to send it to Knoxville. And it was about 90 hours, 95 hours on the airplane, so we're like, yeah, just knock out the 100 hour out there, because this was a revenue producing airplane. So we said 100 hours. They did 100 hour. They did a 100 hour in service. And thankfully, before we left, we caught it. And we're like, no! And they're like, whoa, that's going to take 3 more weeks. Okay, so the phraseology, 50 hour in service, 100 hour in service. And if your service center goes, they kind of give you that look like, what are you talking about? Go, well, according to the maintenance, or the minimum maintenance program.
That's the one for in-service inspection.
Yeah.
Tell you what they will check.
Just to be clear, that bulletin 100 hour in service is not the meet the 100 hour FAA for higher
Correct.
commercial.
It does not.
It does not, okay.
So when you look at, so I put those costs up there because lots of us have asked Cirrus to start providing at least a template, all right, of the inspections and the recommended labor hours.
Yeah, that's what I want to
as
ask. What is included in in-service inspection? But you said that paper.
So I'll give you an example, okay? So I'm gonna do the 100 hour, because it's significant. Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong when I said 3 and 3.5, it's 5 hours and 7 hours for the 50 hour.
Yeah, that's okay. But every CTC has that paper, right?
ASC.
Okay, yes, I'm authorized.
So the labor hours for the SR20 is 23 on the 100, 24 for the 22, and 32 and a half. Oh, no, sorry, that's the annual. Gosh darn it. Yeah, I'm like, that's a little high.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to be sure they have a list of what
So,
to inspect.
As I'm going to find the labor allowance here in a second as I'm reading it. So they do a functional check. Step 2 is review compliance statement for basically all the regulations, the ADs, the manuals. They remove the cowling, engine compartment, clean and perform visual inspection of all nuts for the engine compartment. They check the wiring. They do a 100-hour inspection on the engine, which was generated by the AD, I believe. Don't quote me on that. We do the oil, the filter. There's something that they have to, some weird thing, oil suction screen that they have to clean on the Lycoming. Lubricate in accordance with the lubrication schedule for the engine group. Oil sump, oil cooler fins, high tension ignition harness, engine compressions, which includes the borescope, checking the plugs, the magnetos, induction filter, checking the injection nozzles, gascolator, fuel pump, checking all the fuel lines, checking the battery, not only the battery, but checking that the battery has the required capacitance, crankcase, intakes, alternators, the alternate air door to make sure those are working. They service the propeller, they service the exhaust system. They make sure that all of the cabin ducts going in for fresh air are working properly. Oil breather, engine mount, weld mount, the mount isolators, firewall seals, alternator, starter, master. They inspect the master control unit, the prop governor, FICI inspection, AC inspection. They check the turbocharger, the wastegate, and all of the heat shields. Essentially, for the 100-hour in-service, it has 52 steps.
So
That's just for the airframe.
Let me show you a question. Usually I know oil change is very fast, okay? If I just tell them I need an oil change, I pretty much have to tell them, check my tire everything. Versus if I do 50 hours and 100 hours in-service inspection as what you read, all of those, would that be too much opening everything? Because every time when you open something, when they put it back, never be, would that be overdue? Then
So-
plus the annual, because a lot is what they did in the annual.
So first off, is Lima Charlie still under warranty?
Mine?
Yeah.
Out.
Okay.
I just spent $10,000 for my
So,
annual,
so if your airplane's under warranty, you have to comply with this.
the in-service inspection.
Yep,
Okay.
you do.
We'll at least keep it under warranty.
They will, but remember with Cirrus IQ, they can download everything you do with the airplane, and we've seen a warranty claim denial based on the pilot not flying in accordance with the POH. And when you buy the airplane, buried in those documents, you give them the right to tap into your airplane to download your FOCA data.
I know they did.
So I can tell you that if you come in here and you just ask us for an oil change, right? We're going to do a basic oil and filter change.
Yeah, everything.
You know, obviously we always try and do a gentle sprucing and cleaning of the airplane because we want you to be pleased and happy when you leave. If you want a 50-hour in service, we are going to do that. Now, people will go, well, I'm coming up on this 500-hour. You should be advising me. Well, we try. Right? That's why we've tripled the number of people working in the back office. But we don't manage your airplane.
No, my question is
No,
just for safety and for longevity of the airplane, because I don't intend to change my airplane that fast, although I changed SR20 within 4 years. Okay, I think I'm done. Okay.
Well, you had to get a little experience, and you
Yeah.
smartly spent some time in a beautiful SR20,
Yes, like
and now you're in a
okay,
gorgeous 22.
Yes, I got into the truck, so I got the 22. So my question is for safety reason and also for the longevity. Assume I want to keep it for 8-10 years.
50 and 100-hour in-service interval.
Do that interval. Okay, that answered my question. That's my answer.
This is not new maintenance to this aircraft. It's just a guide to decipher the complexity of the AMM and the ICAs. All right, now this is a pilot speaking, because I deal with the people who are upset because their bill was higher than they expected. Because I went to this service center and they only charged me $485 for an oil change. So I can tell you here, we don't cut corners. And what we have found is we had a high time flyer. They were doing about 275 hours a year, and they religiously came in for their oil change every 50 hours. And they were having it changed at a different location. And they eventually said, you know what, we're bringing the airplane to PRP for an annual. And this was 2 years ago. And when we opened up the fairings and we took a look at the thrust washer, because I ferried the airplane over, I'm like, God dang, I cannot steer this airplane. What's the deal? Right? The caster wheel was almost rusted solid. The airplane was dragging a brake because of the corrosion on the brakes. So if you're a high time flyer, if you are in a very, very salty environment, this is going to make sure that your airplane is going to last as long as possible. If you want to fully comply with everything that the AMM requires, 50 and 100-hour in service.
But there's, in addition to just the cost, the owner needs to consider the cost of not having a dispatchable aircraft.
True.
Because you buy an airplane because it's a time machine, it gets you point A to point B.
Greg, that's a
And
great
if
point.
it's not dispatchable, ooh, that's a major hit.
Yeah, it's huge. And you know, that's why I don't cut corners on magnetos anymore. I shouldn't have said it that way, because I wasn't cutting corners. I was trying to be cost smart for my company and cost smart for my customers. But you know, we were doing something that was 100% legal, but the mags, you know, the number of times where someone would get there and they would do a mag check waiting to run up, and they'd hit the left mag and the engine would die, and now they're coming back, dispatch reliability. So the best way to make a reliable airplane is to maintain it the way the manufacturer, all right, has written to maintain it. And I'll put one plug, know your limitations, right? Knowing chapter 4 of your POH is important, but knowing chapter 4, normal procedures, knowing chapter 2, the limitations, is as important. Know the limitations, know what power settings and how to properly fly your airplane. Because if you're interested, I will go show you what happens to the power plant if you do not comply with the limitations. Right? Because we did a deep dive into the data, and we saw the temperatures of that engine. And I can show you what it looks like. And oh, by the way, that engine generated this report that said, this is a great oil sample and it's getting better. All right, our little 172, we had a report just like this. And 4 days after we got the report, it threw a cylinder. I kid you not. So anyway, this is the 100-hour, the 50-hour and the 100-hour in service.
That's a labor cost, right? The 1,000 and...
No, that's the total.
No, what if the part, anything need to replace?
Well, yeah, if there's damage, then there's more.
Yeah, if there's damage, it would be going up. But again, this is an inspection. Typically, we're not finding anything wrong. So it's oil, a filter, an oil sample, because everybody wants them. We have to pull them from our aircraft because the FAA says you have to have an oil trend analysis program. Okay, if there's something broken, then one of our team will pick up the phone and go, "Hey, we found this wrong. We recommend we fix it now." So it would just kind of divert money that would be spent. But again, what we're really talking about is your safety. So what does this apply to a Cessna and a Piper and a Mooney? Right? 100/annual inspection, ICAs, all right, progressive maintenance, return to service. Right? The unique pieces that we've talked about tonight are the requirements to make sure you maintain your aircraft properly, because the Cirrus, she really is best with it. It's kind of a pseudo-progressive maintenance is the way I think of it as an owner. It's not just an oil change. I'm having them do things that I always thought that they were doing before I got smart about this. Because if you just say an oil change, a lot of mechanics aren't going to check the pressures in your tire. You would think that it's the right thing to do, but
No, they don't.
that takes a half hour. That's time is money, right? So if you don't ask for it, they're not going to do it. So I can tell you this is part of these inspections. That's why there's a little bit more time. All right. So I'm going to stop babbling. Questions or things to raise or BS flags, because I know I'm not perfect and I could have said this stuff wrong.
I have a quick question about return to service. So you were talking about the verbiage that needs to be in the log book. Anytime that anything's taken off there, things put back. Are you including general owner maintenance in that when you change your brake pads and you put them out there? Because typically an owner is not going to write a return to service.
Yes, an owner has to write that they did something with their certificate number.
100%.
Okay, but you need the wording.
So you can't certify that it complied,
Right.
but you have to document the work performed, the date, and i.e. if you're doing owner preventative maintenance, I recommend that you make your write-up look just like theirs, short of the certification, because you're not qualified to do the certification.
Including, I removed serial number blah blah blah, replaced it with serial number blah blah
Yep.
blah. I did this, and then your certificate number.
Yep. So, and look, I can tell you if you own a Cirrus, there's nothing illegal with you having your airplane maintained by a non-authorized service center. If your airplane is under warranty, You don't have to bring it here. I recommend that wherever you're having it maintained, they have legal copies of the AMM, all ICAs. You get a bootleg copy of this to make sure they're doing this, because we have an airplane sitting out on the ramp on the tie-down right now that they had an AMP maintaining it. The airplane's 2 years old, and we're pretty sure the warranty is going to be voided. It showed up here for something little, and we're like, you haven't done an annual in 2 years. Yeah, we have. Well, your logbooks don't support that. But it only has 125 hours on it. Okay. But we can't let it go. So, now, we have seen crazy stuff. We had an airplane that we did not return to service, and we came back Monday morning, it was gone. It did not make it to Boca, though. Something about, the battery was only good for so long when it's not getting charged. And we told him he needed a new Alt-1, and he didn't want to pay for the new Alt-1 because we had to replace his MCU. And he took off. And so, do y'all remember from your Cirrus transition of how to calculate how long your battery will last when you've had total alternator failure? 10 amp hour battery divided by your discharge. So I've got a minus 20, so 10 divided by minus 20 is 0.5 hours. So I've got 30 minutes of electricity. I can tell you that guy proved that math works that day, because I heard from the controllers, because we got a phone call that he went Nordo about 15 minutes from Boca. So that math does work. All right, great question. Other questions? You want to see what it looks like when you cook an engine?